when they filter in, we'll just have them sit. Yes. You should probably just take one out. It should be on. Yeah. Okay, in the interest of time, I think we will go ahead and get started. Just a note that as our remaining panelists arrive, they will just be filtering in. So thank you for your patience and understanding. All right. So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Brianna Lujan, and I'm a Senior Manager of Natural Climate Solutions at Environmental Defense Fund. Before diving in, just a few logistics notes. If you haven't already gotten a headset, please do so. We'll be having simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Portuguese, English, and French. For speakers, please try and speak a little bit slowly for the interpreters. It's always helpful. Yeah. And then also just a note that this event is being live streamed and recorded. Great. So today we're here to discuss how to advance towards the Glasgow Climate Pact, a call to action to achieve 1 gigaton of emissions reductions from forests by 2025. We're joined by an amazing panel, most of whom are here, but I'll go ahead and introduce everyone in the interest of time, and then again before they speak. So we have Susan Gardner, the Director of the Ecosystems Division of the United Nations Environment Program. Marina Silva, the former Minister of Environment of Brazil, will also be joining us soon. We have Maggie Charnley, the head of the UK government's International Forest Unit. We have Pak Alu, the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Environment of Forestry, Indonesia. We have Lola Cabnal of the Asociación Actamit, Indigenous Women's and Biodiversity Network, and the Indigenous Roundtable on Climate Change in Guatemala. We have Dr. Joseph Malassi, the Senior Climate Change Advisor for the Ministry of Environment of the DRC. And we have Dirk Nemitz, the Team Leader of Agriculture, Forestry, and Other Land Use at the UNFCCC. So with that, those are all of our speakers. I hope you're excited. I am very excited to dive in. I will turn the microphone over to Susan Gardner, who's going to provide our keynote remarks. Susan?
Well, it's a pleasure to be part of this really phenomenal group of panelists. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, we think about forests. I think that they are truly our oldest homes, and they've really been a silent witness to our relationship with nature and its evolution over time. During this time of pollution, climate change, and biodiversity loss, that's compounded with the challenges presented by food insecurity and pandemics, forests truly offer us this lifeline and a solution, and we can see them that way. There are powerful nature-based solutions that have the mitigation potential of over 4 gigatons per year. And every year that forests absorb a third of the carbon dioxide that's released from burning fossil fuels worldwide. Actions to halt forest loss and degradation, coupled with sustainable forest management, conservation, restoration, we know it can deliver cost-effective climate mitigation at the scales that we need. But yet, if current deforestation that's happening now every day, if it were a country, it would rank third in carbon dioxide emissions. We know there's no Paris Agreement. We know there's no SDGs without forests. And we have to protect standing forest ecosystems and ensure their sustainable use. We only have 8 years. Action is urgent. We have 8 years to close the widening gap in emission reductions by 45%, to get ourselves back on track for the goal of staying below 1.5 degrees. 8 years in which we must increase ambition, increase finance, implement the pledges, the plans, the commitments, and ultimately deliver. We saw great traction at COP26. It was a great COP of pledges with the Glasgow Leadership Declaration on Forest and Land Use, and just this week, the new Forest and Climbers Leadership Partnership. UNEP is immensely supportive of these positive signals of ambition, while at the same time, we stay mindful that the SDG target 15.2 already had many of the same objectives with a goal to completion by 2020. And now we're moving into 2023. We now need to translate this into credible action and transformative change. To achieve the full mitigation potential of forests and the net zero forest loss by 2030, the next 8 years, we need to achieve the necessary midterm milestones of at least 1 gigaton of high integrity emission reductions from forest by 2025. And the new UNEP report on making good on the Glasgow Climate Pact shows how the progress right now is not nearly fast enough to reach the milestone and to deliver on our urgent climate change mitigation that's needed. Despite widespread recognition that we need forests to fend off the worst of the climate crisis, the financing for forest-based solutions like REDD+ has been insufficient. And as we're halfway to the 2025 milestone, we're only about a quarter of the way to the necessary commitments for emission reductions. And of these commitments, only around half have been realized through signed emission reduction. And we also know that even less, none of them have actually been funded for these commitments that has been dispersed yet. So there's so much that we have to do. And let me be clear, if we fail to achieve a gigaton of emission reductions by 2025, we're seeing these long-term goals getting further and further and harder to attain. So let's talk about what we do need to do. We know to begin with, let's replicate for forests the conditions that have enabled decarbonization in other sectors like energy. If we have a chance of succeeding, we need fair, results-based finance that combines efforts of high carbon prices and predictable demand. And this also means we need fair and a functioning market. Fair donor-funded floor price with private sector demand for emission reductions that sits above that level. This is what's needed. This gives forest countries the means and the predictability to invest in protecting their remaining forests. The current price that we have now at $5 to $10 per ton, that's not even close. And it doesn't resemble the urgency. It doesn't resemble the scale of the problem. And it doesn't reflect what is the cost for tropical countries to protect their forests. So it doesn't make it viable for them. It doesn't work. The bold and necessary step to unlock the supply of forest emission reductions and leverage demand would be a commitment by donors to have a reasonable price, something in the area more like $30 to $50 per ton of reduced forest emission. And let me get to the second lever. It is essential to ensure integrity of emission reductions. There's no room for greenwashing now. And we know how to do this. The Secretary General's put in place a group of experts to ensure the integrity of net zero. It is essential that where the private sector purchases nature-based solutions, offsets as part of a pathway to achieve net zero, not only are those offsets in accordance with social and environmental safeguards, but we have to ensure that there's the transparency and the accountability to make this well understood, that they don't also weaken decarbonization. That has to be happening simultaneously. And there are safeguards that are reflected in current tools like the IUCN Global Standard for Nature-Based Solutions and the instruments like the Cancun Safeguards for REDD+. Integrity is particularly relevant when voluntary carbon markets are considered because the market has quadrupled just since 2020 and 2021 to almost $2 billion. And this is mostly due to forest credits. Concrete rules and guidance are currently being developed by the Integrity Council and the Integrity Initiative for Voluntary Carbon Markets and others. And these are necessary to ensure that forest offsets are of the high integrity that they demand, and that these efforts complement but don't replace decarbonization. We have to make that clear. And lastly, actions and finance for forest and climate must include effective, equitable participation and benefit sharing with Indigenous peoples, local communities, and women. And this is paramount to success of any ecological or social economic system. So to conclude, Friends, Excellencies, we're more than halfway to 2025, and we're less than a quarter of the way to our 1 gigaton goal. This has repercussions for people as well as planet. The choice is on the table now to fix this, right now here at this COP. Nature is the soundest investment imperative to build economic resilience and human well-being and create harmony in nature. If we succeed in reaching 1 gigaton of forest emissions by 2025, then we have these vital targets for nature and climate stay within our reach. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you. And just a welcome to Marina Silva. It's really great to have you here. So I think we're going to go ahead and dive into our panel discussion at this time. Just a reminder, you can find folks' names and titles on the screen. There are quite a few of us up here, which is amazing, and we're so happy and glad. Thank you. So I'd like to start with Maggie, if that's all right. Maggie. Perfect. Yep. And okay, when you're, or just sit there. Yeah.
Tell you what, I'll just sit.
Oh, perfect. Thanks, Maggie. So Maggie, the launch of the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership earlier this week was very, very exciting. I was wondering if you could please explain how central the concept of results-based payments is to the work of the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership.
Sure, and I'll kick off with a quick explanation of what that is. At COP26, as the UK presidency wanted to put nature